help get everybody in the back up here.
You're on the webcam.
Get everybody to take their seats, please. In the back. Everybody wants to sit in the front, do it. Yeah, they might get asked a question. All right, can I have everybody's attention, please? Captain Knowlton. Stop talking. All right, good morning, everybody. I'm Spud Woodward. I have the privilege of being the director of the Coastal Resources Division of the Department of Natural Resources, and thank y'all for coming this morning. This is our rollout of our first ever Coastal Georgia Ecosystem Report Card, and I want to give you a little background on this. A few years ago, the chief of the non-game wildlife conservation section of the Wildlife Resource Division, Mike Harris, who subsequently retired, went to the Fish and Wildlife Service, and I were talking about the fact that we, as the Department of Natural Resources, collect a lot of data through all kinds of different processes. But oftentimes it's very difficult to turn that data into useful information for the public who we're trying to influence to create a conservation ethic so that we can be good stewards of our natural resources. And one of the techniques that has been used with some success in other parts of the country and in other parts of the world is an environmental report card. So we started talking a little bit about that concept and immediately recognized that there's some challenges. How do you take sometimes hundreds of sources of data and combine them into one succinct source of information? And we realized that it was probably beyond our abilities as a department, but it was an admirable goal. And so after a couple of years of sort of pondering on it, I went to Jill Andrews, who is our Georgia Coastal Management Program supervisor, and said, let's figure out how to do this. This is a worthwhile endeavor. I've struggled my whole career with trying to figure out creative ways to turn data into information so people can make good decisions. And I said, let's figure out a way to do this. And so Jill took this on as a project manager and found the folks at the University of Maryland who have expertise and a lot of experience in doing this. So we started down the road, and you'll learn a little bit more about how we got to where we are. But the main purpose of this is to give the citizens of Georgia a source of information so they can have a better understanding of what the condition of our natural resources are on the coast. And so we hope that we've been successful. It's our first foray into this. Certainly, we hope not our last. It'll be a living document that evolves. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jill to give a little more background and then introduce our primary speakers.
Thank you. So good morning, I'm Jill Andrews, and as Bud said, I'm a program manager here at the Coastal Resources Division, and I'm with the Coastal and Ocean Management Program, which is part of our Coastal Management Program. We're acronym soup here. And the purpose of the program that I lead is to provide information and technical assistance to local governments and our citizens. And one of the things that we spend our careers doing is bringing science into management decisions. And so this was a perfect project for our program to take on. As Spud said, for years, in some cases decades, DNR has been collecting data about the state of our coastal natural resources. And so when we got this idea about let's start communicating some of that and letting folks know how things look out here, or at least sharing what we know, we got the scientists in the room from DNR, and there's a fair number of them. We got them from Coastal Resources Division, we got them from Wildlife Resources Division, as well as the Environmental Protection Division. Brought everyone into the room and said, okay, show me what you got. Over 150 data sets are being collected annually by DNR on the Georgia coast. Everything from how much water is withdrawn, to the number of drinking wells permitted, to the shrimp and crab catch and oyster catch, to how many little baby fish are used in the salt marshes. Tons of information, but we tend to use that for management purposes, and so we tend to keep it inside. And unless somebody comes and says, hey DNR, tell me what's going on with the Georgia coast, we don't communicate that a lot. In certain aspects with the coastal management program, we do share that with our communities and work to bring that into planning decisions and things like that, but we're mostly focused on the science. So this was just a really great challenge, but like I said, we had all the scientists in the room and everybody felt that their data set was the most important, and can you imagine? But when we started looking at the sheer volume of it, we said we're going to do this, but let's really think about how to do it. At about that same time, when it was peak of head scratching and puzzling, University of Maryland folks had come down and done a training on Sapelo Island at the NER about communicating science, and the lights went on, everything started to click. We contacted Maryland and said, originally the source of our inspiration for this project was the Chesapeake Bay report card. Is there a chance in the world that we could do that here in coastal Georgia? And so began this project. We're about a year into it. It really takes that long to develop the very first report card. We're thrilled to have that here, and I hope that you see this as our first launch into Know the Connection, Know Your Coast, and us sharing that information with you. And so without a whole lot of further ado, I'm going to introduce our folks from Maryland. And just know that these are really the worldwide resources in the development of report cards. We could not have found a more credible source and who's been more helpful. So we're delighted to have them here, and I hope you are too. So Dr. Heath Kelsey, please come on up and tell us about Coastal Georgia Research.
Great. Thanks, everybody. We're also really excited to be here. This is it's been a great project, and really happy to see this thing come to fruition as well. It's been a long project, and I think it came out wonderfully. I need to give a shout out to Alex Freeze, who really carried the bulk of the load on the project, and I think it came out really well. So we'll talk a little bit about the process and how we got to the report card. Did I need to turn this on? There we go. So, as we said, we work with the Integration and Application Network. It is a group at the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, and which is is a distributed campus around the state of Maryland. Our main goal is focused on science communication, and Jill said we found out about us a little bit through one of our training courses at Sapelo. Our aim is to enable change through better communication. There's a lot of great science, a lot of great data out there. Let's make some information out of that and use that to foster change. When we're with an academic institution, University of Maryland does a lot of great research in Chesapeake Bay and elsewhere. And when people think of an academic institution, they think of particular ways that, or any science-based organization. When you're really studying something, you're really trying to figure out what's happening. There's a certain kind of a couple of things that you keep in mind, and process. You want to be very dispassionate. You want to be objective about the data that you're looking at. You want to be embrace that complexity. Figure out all the variability that's in the data. You want to look at that uncertainty and really embrace that. Your publishing is through, and funding is through a peer review process. So it's scientists talking to scientists, and the focus is on absolutely getting it right. It take 20 years, we're going to get this right. But when it comes to using that science to solve environmental problems, you gotta shift your mindset a little bit, and you gotta develop a passion for what you're doing. You really want to make a change. You got a passion for that. You want to try and simplify, whereas you really want to embrace simplicity in the academic world. You want to try and simplify as much as you can. We do not dumb down data and information. We try and distill the key messages out of information and raise the bar a little bit and educate as well. So it's not simplification to oversimplify, but it's simplifying to get the key messages out of the data. And our publishing and funding comes through stakeholders, groups that come to us to help them with that. And our focus, we still want to get it done right, but we're not going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We're going to get something done, and we're going to, we can't wait 20 years to make a story out of information. We have to get to it. We have different levels of personnel, different types of personnel. We have science integrators, which are generally PhD level scientists, and environmental science and water quality, seagrass, things like that. And they are focused mostly on aggregating the data, working with scientists to interpret the data. And we have science communicators, which are master's level scientists that have additional training in graphic arts. And more our science communicators are being asked to do a lot of the data interpretation as well. We also have a big intern program, a really active intern program. It's not big, but it's very active. And we believe in bringing young scientists at the undergraduate level in and training them in science communication and moving science communication ahead that way. We have several themes that we work with. They're all under the umbrella of science communication. So communicating science effectively is what we aim to do. Reporting ecosystem status, that's ecosystem report cards and other synthetic reports. Teaching and training, as Jill said, we take our show on the road and provide training for how we do science communication and the software and things like that. We have a special focus on Chesapeake Bay, and then building strategic partnerships and creating good citizenship models. We have also resources if you're looking for symbols or images. We have a symbol library on our website, and I've forgotten how many symbols in there. It's thousands of environmental and ecosystem-based symbols that can be used in Adobe software or PowerPoint presentations or other things, and also searchable image database. So also a great resource. And we've had, evidently people like to use it, 130 million downloads from the image library. We mentioned that we've done quite a few report cards. There's a sampling of them. The latest one to come out was the Mississippi River report card, which came out last month, and we released that in St. Louis. That's probably the most complex and largest scale report card that we've done. But we've done Great Barrier Reef report card. We've done them in Samoa and in India. We've also done them in very small tributaries in Chesapeake Bay. So we run the gamut of very large geographies and complex sets of issues to very simple. This is a very small tributary in the Chesapeake Bay geographically.
Question: has anyone gotten an A?
Actually, I meant to say this at the beginning. I think there's we want to save questions for the end. Is that?
Especially that one.
Yeah, especially that. Yeah.
The prominence of the letters jumps out.
Yeah, see
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't believe we have actually given anybody an A yet. So, yeah. And I should have mentioned this before, but yeah, we're going to be taking questions at the end just to speed the process along.
And we're also live on webinar, so for the sanity of those listening.
Yeah. So what is an ecosystem health report card? It's a broad level assessment of a region or an ecosystem. It communicates a lot of complex information. It's important to know and be aware that there's a lot of data that goes into driving these scores and information and the results. We find that the report card is really useful as an accountability tool. So in Chesapeake Bay, for instance, there's a lot of effort being spent and money being spent on management. We're upgrading our sewage system, sewage treatment systems. We're providing money to folks to upgrade their septic systems. We're trying to reduce sediments and nutrients from farms. But at the end of the day, are we making the change that we want to see in Chesapeake Bay? So we can make all the management advances we want on paper, but at the end of the day, let's focus on the condition of the resource. And we also find that the report card is very useful in engaging communities. We found, especially in Chesapeake Bay, it's been going on for about 8 years now, 9 years, the Chesapeake Bay report card, that local communities really started to get engaged and ask questions. And whereas the first report card was kind of kind of took everybody surprised and made a lot of splash in the newspapers. Now they really expect it, and it's still in the newspapers. If we're a little late getting it produced, they want to know why and where it is. So there's good evidence of a lot of community engagement from these report cards. Why are they effective? Well, partly because of peer pressure. You don't want your grade to be, lower than your neighbors. And so it's a little bit of motivation there. And we noticed that especially again in Chesapeake Bay, whereas smaller tributaries started to produce their own report cards because they weren't satisfied with the results they were getting. They didn't want to be lumped in with, Baltimore or something. Like, we got to do better than them. And they're also a very common experience. Everybody knows what it's like to bring home your report card. Some of us know what it's like to bring home not such a great report card. But we all share that experience. We know what it is. People intuitively understand what it is to get a report card. And again, they synthesize a lot of data through analysis and synthesis to produce a result. As we've done report cards elsewhere around the world and around the country, we realized we were doing the same basic steps over and over, and we kind of formalized it. It's a flexible process, but it's basically a 5-step process from getting to from a concept to an actual report card. The first step is to ask, what's the big picture? What does this ecosystem look like? What's happening? What are the issues affecting the resources? What are we trying to protect? What do people value? And what are the processes that are happening that are really important in this ecosystem? Once we have a good understanding of that, we can choose indicators that reflect on those processes, on those resources. Once we choose the indicators, we can start to define thresholds. What does it mean to get a good value for one of these indicators, like chlorophyll concentration? What is a good score for chlorophyll, or dissolved oxygen, or nesting sea turtle, or whatever the indicator is? And then there's a process of creating the scores and aggregating the scores to develop the grades. I used to say that it was just math and it was easy once you get the thresholds. There's a lot of, it's not just math. It's hard. It's really hard work. And then when you get all of that done, you know what the data are telling you. You've got the story. You know what the story is behind the data and what the data are telling you. And now you communicate. So that's this report card, which you'll get a copy of in a minute, and what we're doing here today. There's life after this as well. So that we want to be able to communicate the results of all that to the public, and that's accomplished through a printed document and the report card itself. It's also important to know that the report card sits up here at the top tier of the of synthesis, right? It's the most synthetic product, but we need to keep in mind that it's supported by actual data and actual information, and a lot of it, and a lot of analysis. And it's important to realize that it's supported by that, but also provide a path for somebody that's picking up the report card to be able to get to those higher levels of information or more detailed information, so that that the transparency is there. This is how the report card was derived. These are where the data came from, and transparency is our friend. So why do we want to create a report card for coastal Georgia? We want to provide the public with this broad, fact-based knowledge about the condition of Georgia's coastal resources. We want to highlight the need for continued management of Georgia's coastal natural resources by Georgia DNR, and then highlight the things that Georgia DNR are already doing in monitoring and inventory for natural resource management. The goals for this project are very similar. We want to provide this report card, communicate monitoring results, so that there's a lot of data being collected. Let's distill those key messages and communicate the results. We want to engage communities, which we think report cards can do very well. We want to provide recommendations to improve coastal ecosystem condition and then improve awareness of what DNR is doing in this field. So as we've mentioned, we started working really in earnest on this project about 11 months ago. December was the workshop to bring together the DNR folks to start, and we pulled together data throughout the spring, and then Alex and others pulled together the final report card in September, and here we are today at the release. And this is a photo from the first workshop, and we always sketch out what the report card is actually going to look like, what we think it's changed a lot, but some of those elements are still there. a lot of those elements are still there. So it's fun to see it come from a sketch on a whiteboard to an actual document. That's a fun process to watch. Features in coastal Georgia, you guys know this better than anybody, but it's worth highlighting in this process. 14 barrier islands that are mostly undeveloped. Great habitat. You've got 5 major rivers, almost 370,000 acres of salt marsh, and other streams, brackish, freshwater marshes, bogs, and swamps. Incredible habitat, and really worth highlighting. And it's also worth keeping in mind that coastal Georgia is going to continue to face increasing pressure. There's development pressure, population pressure, and changing sea levels and things like that. So it's important to keep that in mind and to remain vigilant in the management that we need to continue. So we originally intended to produce a report card that reported on the 5 watersheds. And in looking at the sampling site distribution, there were a couple of bare spots down in which one is that one? That's the Suwannee, that's right. Altamont and Savannah. Not as many sampling sites in those rivers from the DNR data sets. There's other data that we're talking about, including in maybe future report cards, but this is focusing right now on the DNR data sets. And so we couldn't actually do that. So and produce a report card for each one of the 5 watersheds. And so we produced a report card for the results overall for the 11 coastal counties in coastal Georgia. So how are they chosen? So in a meeting with our staff, Alex and Caroline Wicks, who's a program manager for us, met with DNR staff and looked at all the data sets and did the conceptualization of what how the system works and what are the most important ones. And they need to be the indicators need to come from data that's part of long-term monitoring programs, linked to natural resource management activities, and coastwide. The list of potential indicators were prioritized, and then the final selections were made by DNR on which ones to include.
With a lot of help.
A lot of help, yeah. So the indicators that are included in the report card, we have 3 human health indicators: enterococci bacteria, fecal coliform bacteria, and fish consumption advisories. 3 fisheries indicators. We looked at the fisheries of shrimp, red drum, and blue crabs, and 6 wildlife indicators: American oyster catcher, wood storks, right whale calves, right whale population, sea turtle hatching, and sea turtle nesting. I said testing last time, and that wasn't very good. And then for each one of these indicators, we need to understand what a good value is. It can come from a beach, a management value or a management guidance document, or from other sources. So these are the thresholds that were chosen. So this is what we want. We want to get less than 70 colony forming units of enterococci, a geometric mean of fecal coliform less than 43, and 14 for a different time. And fish consumption advisories, we're going to look at, we have several different thresholds. So no restrictions at all, 1 meal per week, 1 meal per month, and the most restrictive would get the worst grade, which is can't eat it. Blue crabs, long-term geometric mean, departure from that, same with red drum and shrimp. And these are the time series and where the data came from in the different programs. For the wildlife indicators, we had, this is also where the data came from and the different thresholds, the indices of wood stork productivity and American oyster catcher. We want to see increasing trends for sea turtle testing, and sea turtle hatching, right whale population growth, and we see positive growth population, and then the cabin index as well. And these are where the data came from, where the thresholds, how the thresholds were derived. So here's the results. Show the results. we got a relatively good score, B plus, for the overall coast. Human health index scored a 90 or an A. The fisheries scored a B, and the wildlife index scored a B as well. So overall, I think we did fairly well. It tells a good story about the condition of the coastal the resources in coastal Georgia, coastal ecosystems. And of course, you see a couple of outliers here. Blue crab, which we can talk about a little bit more in depth. I'm sure that that'll come up. Saw a decline in blue crab spawning stock last year, and some varied results in the wildlife scores. And here are the actual scores. The fecal coliform, a 92% score. Enterococci bacteria, 82%. Fish consumption advisory is 95. Shrimp, 100%. Red drum, 83. Blue crabs, 22%. So it's a pretty significant decline from last year compared to the mean, long-term mean. American oyster catchers, 46%. Wood stork, 67. Right whale calves, 57. Sea turtle nesting, 100%, and sea turtle hatching, 77, and right whale population, 66%. You'll notice that we have a very even scoring system. That we did that very deliberately, and it's a scoring system we've used for almost every report card that we've developed in the past, including Chesapeake Bay. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But key messages from the report card: it tells a pretty good story of the condition of coastal resources in the Georgia ecosystems, and we want to continue to protect them. Georgia DNR is going to keep working to protect and restore coastal Georgia. We do need to keep in mind that the pressure on the system is going to be steady. It's going to increase. There's going to be additional pressures. And most importantly, healthy ecosystems mean healthy natural resources, healthy economies, and healthy people. So here's a little bit more about the scoring system. We've used this 0 to 20, 20 to 40. It's very evenly divided. It works really well for environmental and ecosystem data, and it allows us to see a little bit more resolution towards when things are maybe not as good as you would like them to be. And we've had great success with this scoring system in all the other report cards that we've worked on, and it worked very well in this case as well. So the blue crab story, we did see a decline in blue crabs over the long-term 20-year mean, and it was the lowest indicator in any of the report card. It's based on the number of spawning female crabs, and it's corroborated by other sources. So you're seeing that same decline in commercial harvest and catch per unit effort, and the trawl survey reported a 65% decline in juveniles in 2014, and we can talk more about that in the question and answer if you'd like. We think that this was a result of spawning and larval recruitment success by cooler weather in fall water temperatures, and then really high spring flow, which prevented larvae from coming into the estuaries. We did look at including water quality, and that's there's a story that's included in the report card itself, which looks at water quality indicators. It's something that we would normally like to see in a report card. Dissolved oxygen, it was scored because we had thresholds that made sense: hypoxic water and antarctic water, and the high regular oxygen water, or high DO. And the issue was that we just couldn't agree on the thresholds that were used for water quality. There's a lot of work going on right now to finalize what those thresholds should be, and we didn't feel like now was a good time to break them out, because they're still kind of in flux, and still working on what those thresholds for most of the water quality data should be. So the take-home message: it presents information gathered by a lot of DNR agencies. The ecosystem is in moderately good health in 2014. I think it's a pretty good story. A B plus, it's a good grade, and we want to share that with the public, and that's why we're here and producing this report card. We also include in the report card a section on what people can do in their own neighborhoods and in their own around their own homes and in their own personal lives to help protect resources. And things like installing a rain barrel to reduce your stormwater impact, taking care of your septic system, beach lighting rules for when during the sea turtle nesting season and hatching, play by the rules when you're fishing. That's a pretty good one. Picking up after your pets. I always have to point out that symbol. It's a great one. But that's something that you can do, and it has a surprising it can have a surprising impact on water quality. And then we want to see people participating more. Something like a report card can really highlight conditioned ecosystems, and we hope that more people will get engaged and participate in things like cleanups and things like that. There we go. Thanks very much. And Jill is passing out report cards now, so you get a hard copy of the report. And we'll have time for questions and answers, both to us and to the DNR folks. And we're going to alternate questions from here and from the online. And if you don't mind moderating that part, I'll go to here. So, first.
Yes, sir. In your wildlife indicators, why didn't you use any land mammals? Like some of the ubiquitous ones like possum or coon, raccoon, white-tailed deer, things you have tons of data about.
Yeah. No, you want to answer that? You were in those discussions.
Yeah, we talked about using a lot of different types of land animals, including I guess alligators are both land and water. But we came to kind of the discussion that for now we don't really know if that's as much of the values of the coastal system as much as just an aspect of the environment that we need to be monitoring. So we didn't include the possums or deer. And we also have a lot of management occurring on those resources, so they're like greatly impacted by management for the deer population or things like that. So we didn't include it with this report card. Yes.
You indicated that the alcohol was a limited sampling.
Yes.
Why?
We only use the DNR Coastal Resources Division data, so we didn't have as many sampling sites in that watershed as in the Ogeechee and the St. Mary Satilla, as well as in the Savannah. There weren't that many sampling sites, but in the future, we've been talking to Jill about adding in more data wider than just the DNR data, and so with those additional data sets, we may be able to have more resolution for those watersheds.
Fantastic presentation, by the
Thanks.
way. Really enjoyed that. Is the goal to do now, from this point on, an annual report card?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that is our goal.
Awesome. That's amazing.
So yeah, that is the plan. Unfortunately, Maryland has set us up to do that. We're going to try it for 2015, see how it goes, and see how the public receives this document as well. But that is, in fact, the plan for an annual update, and then in an appropriate time frame, be it 3 years, 5 years, or whenever we have the resources, we'll go and do work with Maryland again to reevaluate the indices and the indicators and make any updates as well. So it's hopefully going to be a living document.
So we want to take a couple.
I got a question here. It says, why would cooler water temperatures only impact female blue crabs? Do you suspect other potential causes, such as impacts from environmental pollutants, from which females would be more susceptible? Pat?
I don't suspect it's contaminants and pollution. I don't think it's as much the cooler water temperatures as it was the stream flow. We had flood stages all spring and summer, which affected recruitment. So, but those stream flows, when you have that much rain, you're going to have lower water temperatures generally. But it's the stream flow that's
keeping the larvae out of the
estuary.
And for those of y'all that couldn't see that on the webinar, that was Pat Gear, Chief of Marine Fisheries.
Oh, I guess not.
To hitchhike on that, I've heard that this is endemic all the way up and down the coast from
Chesapeake Bay all the way down to here.
Yeah.
The drop off in the blue crab.
We discussed that earlier today. We're seeing very similar trends in Chesapeake Bay
Yeah,
this year as
for
well.
Chesapeake for 2014, we got a 30% for blue crabs, and
Using the same methods.
yeah, and you got the 22%. So we're seeing a similar decline for the blue crab
Do
population
you
there.
attribute to what he's talking about? You know, the
Probably,
flood problem also?
yeah. We don't fully understand what's
It's
going on
probably
with the
more
population,
environmental
but
factors
yeah.
than anything else, is what's suspected.
Yeah.
Not overfishing or overall?
Certainly not in this state.
Yeah.
No,
And we've just recently increased the fishing restrictions for female crabs in the Chesapeake Bay as well, so that should have a positive effect on that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank y'all very much. I'm really glad that you've done this, and you've done a great job of compiling a lot of complex information. Many of y'all know, I am Alice Keyes. I work for the 100 Miles. We're a coastal advocacy organization, but I used to work for the Environmental Protection Division, so I'm going to put my EPD hat on now and ask about the water quality limitations with some of the report. I understand that the DO issue has been something that everybody's been grappling with for quite some time, and I'm looking at the just briefly at the image, and it seems like most of the DO samples were done in tidally influenced areas, and I'm wondering if y'all's plan is to grow that data set and really go up into the second tier communities and the freshwater systems that are there, and what needs to happen to really pull in that EPD data set that was really used for some of the statewide water management planning and a lot of the supply planning that they're doing, because they're looking at stream flows and have a lot of new models that are being done. They're still a work in progress, as everybody knows. But I want to learn a little bit more about the limitations and what your plans are to fill the gaps moving forward.
So I'll take the first stab, and then Alex, who actually fiddled with the data, can contribute as needed. But so we did look at all of the water quality data collected by both CRD and Environmental Protection Division, put it on the map, and evaluated chlorophyll A, water clarity, nitrogen,
phosphorus, and DO.
She's great. Thank you. And so for coastwide, we did have data both in the tidally influenced areas, and then EPD does collect information further up into the 11 coastal counties. And we were prepared to go forward with an index, but as Heath mentioned, it really came down to the readiness of the thresholds that we would evaluate against. And so that was the real problem there. And I'm probably going to underrepresent this because I'm not the water quality expert, and unfortunately EPD was not able to be here with us today, but we can certainly delve into this a little bit further. But there has been a tremendous amount of research ongoing about what these thresholds should be. Dissolved oxygen is a great example because it's an indicator. It should below the threshold for dissolved oxygen should indicate some other problem in a waterway, like a loss of biodiversity or even the death of some of the species living there. And where we do encounter low DOs most frequently, we don't see any of those expected results. And so that is telling us that that indicator is probably not, the threshold may not be suitable for that indicator. And so that's why this research is continuing to go on. Now sometimes, as Heath mentioned as well, sometimes you do have to pull the trigger for management purposes. There were some problems to solve for like total TMDLs and other management aspects, and so they do have to go with thresholds. The ones that we're using in the state of Georgia are largely based on national or even regional, and they're not specific to our area. And so at the end of the day, realizing that we're going to be working on this for a few more years, it felt inappropriate to put forward a water quality index right now because we're going to change it, and we're not really sure how it's going to change, and that could lead to more confusion. So I do want to share with you that we do have the data, and we do actually have them graded on national thresholds, but we can always share that water quality data with folks. We'd be happy to do that. But now we did go ahead and provide dissolved oxygen because water quality is one of the most important factors here on the Georgia coast, and we didn't want to ignore the topic altogether. We did want to share with you what we do know about the data that CRD is collecting. And you're absolutely right, CRD really focuses on those tidally influenced areas, and the majority of these data points are associated with areas that you collect shellfish or beach water quality, so they're very much here, and the results that you see on DO is very much what you expect in a very well mixed tidal system. But even there still, we went with a national threshold from the EPA's National Coastal Condition Assessment. We felt that was a safe one to go with because documents and reports have already been published for Georgia using those standards, and so we did want to provide some information, but we didn't want to let anybody lead anybody to believe that we have all the answers right now. So that's my
pretty much covered it.
okay. So
Yeah,
anybody feel free to add anything else, but it's a very complex situation and a lot of data crunching going on with EPD right now.
And obviously, it's a great opportunity to to include this as that gets sorted out over the next several years in future report cards. So I think that's the goal.
And also, I think some of the coverage for some of the non-tidal areas wasn't as robust as we might want to see for a report card too. So that's another gap that we identified.
Any other
Nobody in
questions?
cyberspace.
Okay. Other questions from Bruce?
That's it.
Great. Oh, here's one.
I'm Doug Sampson. I'm the reserve manager at the Saco Island National Estuarine Research Reserve. And as many of you know, we are primarily funded by NOAA, and we also get a lot of our guidance from NOAA. And in recent years, NOAA has begun to strongly encourage us to think more about social science and the way that people value ecosystem services. We've got a partnership project going on right now in the central Georgia coast, trying to evaluate how people feel about coastal resources. So my question, and it's broad one, I guess, is how has the University of Maryland Center, which I'm familiar with, I lived in Maryland for a long time, have you ever gone about trying to assess how the people and the public would rate or create a report card for their coast?
Yep.
Did you talk about that aspect of it in this project? And might there be some value in figuring out whether or not most of the citizens of the coastal counties of Georgia would rate their natural resources similarly?
Yeah.
Or would they in fact have a suite of resources that aren't included in a report card like this, that are of more importance to them than, say, wood storks or blue whales or sea turtles?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we know that, but
yeah.
How do you match what the public thinks and feels with what you want to tell them about the state of the Georgia coast, and how do you bring those into alignment?
Well,
I think a remaining challenge.
I think there's two questions in there. One is, how do we bring social science and social implications into the report card? And we have had some experience with that. Right now we're working on a report card pilot with NOAA's Coral Reef Monitoring Program. And we've done a pilot project for American Samoa and a pilot project for the Florida Reef Tract. We just had that workshop, a week and a half ago in Fort Lauderdale. And a full section, it's one of the 4 sections is on social science. How do people value the resources in reef resources, and trying to tie that back to ecosystem services and value. So it is an emerging field. The other report card that we just released was the Mississippi River one, and the other way to incorporate social sciences to really take a step back. There were 6 goals in that report card. Only one of them was ecosystem. It was transportation value and flood protection, etc. And so that's another way. Each one of those goals has to have indicators that matter. And the second part of your question is, how do you match what the public values and what you're reporting in the report card? I think we're going to get a lot of feedback. I would expect a lot of feedback from this report card saying, hey, what about this, what about that? And as Jill mentioned, every several years, we can think about the indicators that we're including, and if we want to include some other ones. In Chesapeake Bay, we got that message loud and clear that, hey, what about fish? We were reporting on water quality and habitat, but not actually blue crabs, oysters, and striped bass, which everybody knows people care about in Chesapeake Bay. And so we've heard that message, and we're starting to incorporate those indicators as well. So it's an ongoing iterative process, and I think that's how I would approach it in this case as well. And get some feedback and solicit that feedback from folks about what could be in.
Take one here.
Okay, we have a couple questions from
the question posed is, I think they heard you say loud and clear that y'all haven't given an A. So the question is, why not change the B+ to an A-? Then you could say there is one spot that is better than all others. But I think it speaks to you saying how you don't compare.
That's right. Yeah, there's two parts to that. One, we don't make up the scores. You know, we let the data and the evaluation tell us what the score should be. So that's one reason we don't do that. But yeah, the other part of that is, yeah, we don't necessarily want to compare directly the overall scores from this watershed with Chesapeake Bay or with another watershed. The indicators that are relevant for this ecosystem are unique, and everywhere we've gone, the indicators that are relevant for those ecosystems and regions are unique. That's not to say we couldn't compare like blue crabs, which are measured very similarly in different areas. We could do an indicator by indicator comparison, but it's really not at this point appropriate to try and compare directly to other ecosystems in the North Atlantic.
And just to pile on, the whole purpose of the report card itself, as a communications tool and taking all this disparate data and synthesizing it into more easily able for managers to use and the public. It's based on real data that's scored, mathematically in a transparent and defendable manner. So it is not us saying, oh, it gets an A. It's scored, and then you see what the percentage is, and then it gets the score. So.
This is probably a better question for Jill. What is your distribution plan for this thing to the state?
Okay, that's a great question. Thank you. So today is our launch, the report card launch. You all are among the very first to see this. And so we have directly notified some 7,000? 11,000 people that this launch was happening today. And we will also share with that same 11,000 people the results of the report card. This will be available on our website in about an hour, maybe even less. On our website, it's also going to be accompanied by a white paper document that gives some of the details behind what you see in the report card. So that's through our Gov Delivery service. These are people who subscribe to information about the coast. And we also have different stakeholder groups like a Coastal Advisory Council, Fisheries Advisory Panels, and they will get copies of this as well. Beyond that, we did reach out this morning to local media and hoping to be able to get a little bit of coverage there so even more individuals become aware of this. There is some hope that this will be so successful that other regions of the state will choose to do their own report card. I think that all depends on.
One would hope that you're going to send a copy of this to every person sitting in the Capitol.
Actually, I do have that mailing list. So, yeah, we do intend to communicate this with our state elected officials, our local elected officials, as well as our folks up in Washington. So.
Can we do one more from the
Sure.
web?
The question is, the presentation only presented general indicator groups of species. Any thoughts on future report cards presenting the data on subspecies such as white shrimp from other classes of shrimp found in coastal Georgia? And if this data exists, how will it be treated in the evaluation?
Yeah. That's a good question.
This is Pat Gear from Chief of Marine Fisheries. The problem dealing with subspecies, if you can add species after species after species, and all it's doing is confounding the issue. I mean, Maryland has done this for years, and what they've shown is that you want to have a forage species, a major predator, and a keystone species. And for us, it's red drum, blue crabs, and shrimp in general. So the shrimp are our forage species in that case, and it's like I don't think we're going to get any benefit from it. I think combining the browns and the brown shrimp and the white shrimp together is perfectly adequate for this exercise.
And in general, if I could add to that, adding lots of detailed indicators generally doesn't get us any more information. There's a sweet spot in the number of indicators that tell you the information that you can distill those key messages out. You add indicators, you're just adding effort. You're not actually getting any more information out of it.
But wouldn't it indicate a problem with the subspecies if there were one?
Well, technically it's not a subspecies, it is a species. Now, yeah, we do that in fisheries. We have an index of abundance for white shrimp and brown shrimp separately. But overall, so there will be some years, 2003 is a good example. We had a very poor white shrimp year, but we had a very good brown shrimp year. So combining the two kind of dilutes it a little bit. But we have, within fisheries, we separate those out individually. But for this exercise, I think it's better doing that way. And maybe in the future what we could do is have a link to our fisheries website where we show all our fisheries estimates of abundance that we're doing.
The other thing I could add to that is that usually in our report card we have at least one section that is there to tell a story that maybe didn't show up in the data or is underneath the data. If something like that happens, you can highlight that as a story in the report card and go into it in some detail. And this one we used the dissolved oxygen. That's one of those.
As well as the blue crab story.
And the blue crab story. That's right. We have a question in the back.
Yeah, one more. It was actually a comment and sort of a question related to earlier when Doug asked about kind of the public perception, and you said how after these things get released, typically there's like a lot of public, what about this, what about that? So I just wonder if there's a way moving forward to capture and incorporate like hotspot areas that get identified, because I know they exist. There's quite a few in coastal Georgia, hotspot areas that maybe aren't in those sampling points, and just how those areas impact the overall ecosystem. Maybe that's something to think about.
Absolutely, and a couple points to go back to, especially for the first report card. We were focusing on data that's collected by DNR, and for the indicators that we do have selected, we do actually have those broken down by data point. Each data point is given its own score, and so it was a really interesting process to go through this whole thing. And we did wind up doing some on-the-fly QA/QC of the data, and where things seemed out of whack, we were able to go back and reevaluate that before it wound up in the report card. So the process itself was really great. There are definitely, this is generalized for coastal Georgia, and there are definitely areas. We do have the data analyzed by watershed. There are definitely some indicators that are poorer in one watershed over another, and I think fish consumption advisory would be a really great example of that as well. And so this is an opportunity for us to look at the data in the way that we haven't before. And as we said, as we go forward with the indices, we're going to have to evaluate whether it makes sense to start drawing in additional data from research or from other programs, and how to factor that in there. But if we have the map, and we can see where there's also a large number of gaps. And so this is a great for gap analysis for both research as well as DNR monitoring programs. So all that is already in the back of our minds, and we're already kind of thinking forward to next year. And as we went through this process, we're already thinking about how we're going to do it next.
It's amazing, amazing work.
Thanks.
Great. Here's one from the webinar.
With the recent freshwater intrusions into the coastal area, has the salinity of our coastal region been adversely affected?
Good question.
I don't know the answer to that. No? The answer is no.
I don't know. What do the researchers say?
It's natural variation that is part of the system down here. It's a dynamic system that salinity is constantly changing. So when you have a prolonged event like Pat referenced, like a seasonal type thing, not a week or two or something like that.
But generally no. Okay.
So I'm Madeline Russell with Georgia Sea Grant. How many data sets are behind? Do you know off the top of your head how many data sets are behind the report card?
This report card?
Yes.
I think we listed
How many sampling sites, or how many data sets?
Well, I was there when you launched your Chesapeake Bay report card.
Right.
And you said how many, and I love that number. There was so many for this one letter. So I just wondered.
Right. Well, for Chesapeake, there's 180 sampling points. which, you know, they sample every 2 weeks
Yeah.
or whatever for the year. But for this report card, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but for the fisheries, for example, you know, there's those data sets as well as the right whale data sets and the sea turtle data sets and
Yeah.
the fecal coliform data and entero and the fish consumption. So it is a lot.
I think we considered 150 data sets. Is that the
That was
number
our
that?
starting number,
That was
that
our
we
starting
identified
number,
one
then
hundred
we
fifty.
went down from there, and I don't know what the grand total was. You can look at those and
Yeah.
see, like, you know, each one of those indicators is probably at least one separate survey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll calculate it out.
It would be interesting to know,
Yeah.
especially for moving forward, how many people we have to contact.
That's in the
That's right.
technical report.
Yeah.
Just to let you know, there's probably a couple of thousand, if you consider all the data just in CRD, there's probably a couple of thousand records each year.
Yeah, I would agree.
Especially water quality,
Yeah.
each year.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Easily.
Oh, you almost
Just
had it.
a general, DNR question. The rivers seem to fall into a hole here. Do we have a program that's dedicated to river, experiences and definitions like we have with the coastal?
So for water quality, more of the sampling is done by Environmental Protection Division. And so they definitely have a wider coverage of that. You'll see CRD definitely is, you know, very tidally influenced down
Right.
here. So there is, I mean, let's see, Alex, maybe you can remember some of the spread on the map as well, but I think a lot of that falls with EPD.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of research going on, and there's also a lot of volunteer efforts going on that were not considered in the report card.
Yeah, I know that the Altamaha is what, the fourth largest river on the East Coast?
Is it that small?
Actually has the second largest discharge of any freshwater river system in the eastern seaboard.
Yeah.
On the eastern
On
seaboard.
average,
So
in
I mean,
terms
that's a
of
pretty
cubic feet per
important
second, that's, yeah.
Does the
consideration,
Altamaha have
I
a river
suspect.
keeper?
It does have a river keeper, and it is also the site of a long-term ecological research program. So the amount of data collected being on the Altamaha by groups other than DNR is tremendous. And Doug, you may be able to speak more to that, but there is a lot of effort on that river, and along the Savannah too, which is why you see more of a gap in what DNR collects on those two water bodies. But do you want to add anything to that, Doug? So, and we can link you up with that research. We're actually talking about trying to figure out how to get all the research on the map so that we could, you know, see what the amount of information being collected is. Tricky.
In the back.
I had a question related to the human aspect of the report card.
Mhm.
One of the things that Heath, you mentioned is that, you know, moving forward we're gonna have more pressure on the Georgia coast, and having a report card like this as a starting point is good because it shows the quality of our resources. But that, I think that pressure is gonna end up in, you know, more growth, more septic systems, you know, a greater human impact. And so when y'all in the sets that you compiled, was it, I know we have a pretty robust land use or land map, including some of the DNR data on plant systems and growth over time. Can y'all talk a little bit about the reasons why that set wasn't pulled in and evaluated as part of the report card?
Population pressure and that kind of
Just
thing.
those direct.
Yeah. I can speak to that in general, but maybe you guys have a specific response related to the discussions you had.
Yeah, so the primary reason is we don't have plans or resources to continue that mapping over time. So having an update of that map, although it is a goal, may not fall within the purview of this, and obviously those impacts are what we would be most concerned with, continued development, especially excessive development that would really affect these resources. But ideally, these indicators will reflect that development, you know, by virtue of having decreased or degraded habitat. So that's part of the thinking too, as well as you see development increase, you would presumably have impacts on these species. And of course, the reason it was chosen to be. And so it should be reflected in that, but yeah, more pointedly, I guess, it would be ideal to have, some sort of land cover base, metric in there. It's just not really doable, we feel like at this point.
It's
It's just a lot of resources to.
Yeah, it's reflective of you know, a trend that we're seeing in other report cards, in that you know, we want to reflect, primarily we're trying to report on the condition of the resources and the ecosystem, but then we also want to say, okay, what's affecting that? And this falls into, you know, one of those things, you know, this keeping track of increasing population and development pressure as a pressure. So we have pressure, state, and then management response. We can also track what we're doing in management. Are we fulfilling our management goals? And then at the core of it, though, is this is ecosystem health. You know, given the pressures and the management response that you've got, are we doing enough to protect the resource? And so we tend to want to separate out the ones that and look at separately the indicators that are really reflecting on pressure on the system and the state of the ecosystem or condition of the ecosystem. If that makes any sense.
I just, for me, it further emphasizes the need for that, the data from PCB.
I
To
think
really tell the full story.
yeah, I think in the future having the water quality index in the report card would answer those, you know, land use change questions.
Yeah, thank you.
We have one from.
Yeah, we do. The question is, coastal Georgia has been getting a lot of media attention regarding the PCB and mercury impacts to dolphins. How does the 2014 results supplement this, if at all?
No.
I don't think it reflects on that.
Answer.
Please go ahead.
My name's Clay George. I'm the marine mammal biologist with Georgia DNR. We discussed whether we could include dolphin data in this process, and in some ways that would be ideal because there are stocks that are resident animals that would be affected by localized impacts, as compared to say something like right whales. The problem is we just don't have the resources to do an estuary by estuary monitoring project for dolphins, because it would be incredibly expensive to do that. We have some targeted projects in the Brunswick area, and Savannah State has a similar project in Savannah, that we're just not at that point.
I think that, yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's one of those things that maybe one of those stories that you could tell with, you know, in the next, you know, subsequent versions of the report card. It's something that's happening that people want to know about and you want to be able to communicate on, but it's very difficult to figure out how that could be included as an indicator and scored in the report card.
And if it was included, if we had the data and it was included and scored every year, would it just be the same every year because PCB, you know, mercury residence time in the tissues is so long? We also talked about, you know, the contaminants that you guys have, you know, some Superfund sites, so, but just with the report card, it's not really the right venue for that, unfortunately.
As we all know, natural ecological processes do not respect, have no awareness of geopolitical boundaries. And so I'm wondering if this report card might stimulate our South Carolina and Florida neighbors to undertake a similar project and lead to some of the cross-boundary, biogeographic region kinds of discussions that would address the larger regional impacts on some of these indicators and resources.
I think
As long
you
as
should
they don't bring our
lobby.
grade down.
I think you should lobby the states to do that and hire us to come and help you.
Shameless plug.
So, I mean, that's a really interesting question. I mean, this geographically may have been a sort of a small area. Have you done any projects like that? I mean, the Great Barrier Reef, anything like that?
Yeah.
Where it was considered of, you know, multiple, you know, jurisdictions like states or.
Well,
Yeah.
Mississippi.
Yeah, I mean, we've done. Yeah, the Great Barrier Reef is a very long, large ecosystem, and we've done, you know, broken out 5 different regions within the Great Barrier Reef. That's only one state, but you know, Australia only has 5, so you know, it's a big area. But yeah, that's absolutely something we could do. And if the states, you know, Florida and South Carolina did do something similar, it would be great if we could coordinate that effort with this one so that we were looking at similar indicators and could make those direct comparisons and present an overall a bigger picture. That'd be great.
Yeah.
I would assume Mississippi study was multi-state.
It was.
It's the whole watershed, so.
31 states. Yeah, 41% of the continental United States. Yeah.
But that also, as far as administrative, is a much larger budget to do that kind of project on that scale. And they had a lot of indicators going into the social indicators. They had, economy, flood risk and reduction, transportation, as well as ecosystems. So.
Supplemental landscape.
I'm sorry?
The supplemental landscape conservation.
We did.
Oh.
Property, does that get to any of that?
I'm not sure.
Kind of. It's multi-state. And so it's the South Atlantic Landscape Conservation Coalition.
LCC.
Yeah. And so we just, within the last year, we completed a report card for them as well. So that is another multi-state thing. We've seen report cards kind of happen organically in a more local region and then spread out like this one does. And we've also seen things like the Mississippi River one that starts out at a regional level. So we looked at 5 regions. We didn't do a separate report card for each state. We did 5 of the basins within. So the Ohio, the upper Mississippi, the Missouri, Arkansas, and the lower Mississippi. And the next step we hope with that is to get more resolve. So we want to get deeper. So I'd like to see both those things happen in this case. So we've got the overall Georgia coast. It'd be great if we could graduate to presenting the results in more spatially resolved way for the 5 watersheds, and then also expand into the north and south.
But it would be really a discussion between the states and who wants to do the report card, and if those people feel like they can work together and then find some sort of funding source for it. But it would be really
great.
cool.
Other questions? Comments?
Yeah.
Great.
What was the most unique or surprising thing that you discovered when you did this report card?
This one.
That we got a B+.
Personally, I did not know that you have right whales at all.
Yeah.
I never knew that. So that was really interesting. For us, we do report cards all around the country and around the world. So every time we go to a new place, we find out all about the ecosystems, and we get to work with great people. Jill's done a great job on this project, and so it's really new every time. So even though I'm doing report cards, a lot of report cards, they're all different, and so they're all interesting. And yeah, the right whales, really, I was like, oh, we need to go see them.
Any other things from your guys' side that were very surprising?
No, the whole process was really interesting. The first thing that surprised me was that we had enough data to do a report card, so that we could actually do the grade. Because we went into this saying, do a grade if you can, but if you can't, we'll just do a status report. So the amount of information that we do have was really a surprise to me, and maybe to others as well. When we assessed it, like I said, it was truly, the data spoke for itself, and so when it all rose up to a grade like a B+, which I think is still the highest in the United States. That felt really good. There's just no denying that. We were a little bit like, okay, what's the teacher gonna say? And so there was a lot of pleasure at that big reveal for us as well. And so the whole process was just cool to watch. The participation that we had was really great. It just all around was, I think, a really good project for DNR to engage in.
I would say from my point of view on this that it's in an age where models and statistical models, and it's getting more and more complex. What we're doing, even though it was work, the actual process was pretty clear cut and easy to follow through to the end. And that was kind of like, oh, this isn't that hard to do. It was a lot of work getting all the data together, but when you deal with stock assessments and some of these other modeling things, your mind starts to go crazy. This is actually straightforward.
Great. good to hear.
So easy a scientist can do it.
Could you write that down? I wanna put that on our website.
Record it.
Oh, good, good.
It's recorded, yeah.
Good.
So, anything else?
If anyone thinks of anything,
Yeah.
feel free to contact me or anyone else who's involved.
Yeah.
So,
Great.
and yeah, feel free to email me as well. We'll offer that if anybody wants to take a deep dive into the data that we looked at, please feel free to let us know. Marilyn is going to transfer all that information to us, so we will have it. And like I said, in about 15 minutes, you'll be able to go and view this on the website along with the technical report. For those of you from CRD, you already have a copy of the report card in your box. I wasn't being snooty, not giving you one. But for many of you as well, I included frequently asked questions. A lot of these questions we heard today and others didn't come up, so hopefully you'll be able to refer to this. And if not, give me a call. This is a transparent process, and we just wanted to share with you all what we know about the state of coastal Georgia. We're a solid B+. So thank you all very much for your time.
Yeah, thanks.